This is World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with your host, Carl Gruber. World Awakenings is a podcast dedicated to opening your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to all things metaphysical and spiritual, and just how they play an all-important role in our daily life. So join Carl on this enlightening experience as he interviews metaphysical and spiritual experts to discuss, debate, and delve deeply into the hows and whys of this worldwide awakening.
We welcome you to the World Awakenings podcast. Before we start, we'd like to tell you about a special ebook written by the show's host, Carl Gruber. The 3 Pillars, a simple 3-step process to manifest positive and permanent change in your life. The concise 32-page 3 Pillars ebook will teach you how to become a successful and consistent co-creator of your life path with the law of attraction. Yes, you can manifest the life you truly desire, and the ebook is absolutely free. Simply go to Carl's website, carlgruberlifecoach.com. That's KARLGRUBER lifecoach.com. Click on the header title About Me and get the free download today. Carl Gruber's free ebook, The 3 Pillars, will positively change your life.
All right. Once again, everybody, welcome to World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment. This is episode number 26. And for the last couple years, wow, it's amazing that I've been doing this show this long. We've had a chance to have some of the finest teachers of modern spirituality, specifically from A Course in Miracles, on this show. And today, once again, we're graced with one of the most excellent ACIM teacher spiritual counselors on the show, and that is Maureen Muldoon. Now, I'm taking this right from Maureen's website, and I love this, the way she describes herself. She's a spiritual Pied Piper and shameless storyteller and a speaker who is transforming the way people think about church, sex, spirituality, and creativity. She celebrates the miracles that live beneath the mundane, and she's devoted to helping you create your most engaged and unapologetic life. I love that. And she is a celebrity life coach, supporting musicians, actors, and athletes to achieve their personal and best professional goals. So welcome, Maureen.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it is just awesome to have you here. Of course, you know, we're all sitting at home during this pandemic. I call it the fear-demic. And, you know, so what I can see of what's on your agenda, you're not bored, are you?
I think we should, first of all, I think we should change it to the love-demic, because only love is contagious.
Yes, I like that. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'm sort of a creative whirlwind, and we're created to create. So being creative is, I think, what keeps us out of trouble. You know, getting into trouble is where we start to make things up and step sideways. So I adore creativity, and I love supporting people in being creative. So, but the key is, in my experience, is that I have the tendency, I have that addiction gene in me to overwork. So the Course in Miracles really helps me to make sure I'm not doing anything I can't do in peace. So being creative, but also making sure to, unplug. And the unplugging part, I think, is the hardest for me.
Well, I do want to point out to our viewers and listeners, I'm sure many of you know Maureen from seeing her on TV and on the big screen. You've had a successful career as an actress. I watched a little collage of your appearances on the screen on your website, and one of them was pretty cool. I think you were a waitress and you were doing a skit with, was it Pierce Brosnan, number 007?
Yes, that's correct.
That was quite a scene.
It was awesome. We shot it down in Mexico, and it was with Greg Kinnear and Pierce Brosnan, and it was just great. It was just a wonderful set. And,
was that in a movie or on TV? Or?
It was a movie. It was called The Matador.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. He's quite the charming guy until he whipped out a couple $100 bills.
Right.
And the way you said goodbye to him, so I won't even do that. So,
Well, that's my Jersey girl came out in me.
oh, on-screen ad living, I like that. But yeah, so many people, you've had quite a career, like you said, and I'm just mentioning again. I saw all the things that you're involved in, and just some of the programs and courses that you offer. Something called Artist Zen, Voice Box, Miracles Live 365, A Course in Creating, Speakeasy Spiritual Community, and Creators Writers Retreat and Classes, and I'm sure you probably have more in there, but I'm impressed with that Miracles Live 365. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, sure. Thanks for asking, because it's my heart, really. About 7, maybe 8 years ago, I was hired to do a couple of talks at the Bodhi Spiritual Community.
Mm-hmm.
And I had been taking a course called B School with Marie Forleo. And she helps people to build their businesses. And she said, if you're going to get hired for something and they don't have a high budget, like, see if you can add value to whatever you offer. So it was quite sort of a mistake, but of course, Spirit was behind it. And I thought, well, I'm going to do these 3 talks on A Course in Miracles, and I'll add 21 days of walking people through the workbook of A Course in Miracles. And so on the final talk, throughout the whole series, I was telling people, sign up for this. We'll go 21 days. It'll be great. We'll get up at 6:45 in the morning, and I'll get you to get into this habit of studying the principles. So around day 15, people were loving it, and they were like, let's go the distance. So let's go the whole 365. So when it first started, it was actually just Miracles Live, because I was going to bring people to live miracles on a conference call. And then it turned into Miracles Live 365. And when I first was invited to do that, I was thinking, like, no way in heck am I going to get up every single day with people. And I checked in with my internal teacher, and I said, like, am I supposed to bring people through the lessons of A Course in Miracles 365 days live every single day? And the answer was, do you have better plans? I was like, damn. So
Spirit always knows how to answer. Yeah.
Oh, it's such a smart ass. So we've been doing these online calls and this online virtual community for the past 8 years, and it's grown into 3 calls at this point. We do A Course in Miracles and 12-step meetings. We do, some retreats with them. So it's actually a beautiful community, completely designed by the Spirit. And now we have other teachers that teach. And
I think I saw that, yeah.
Yeah, it's just been really nice. Like, even this morning, of course, I was on both of the calls, and people sometimes say, like, why do you still get on the calls when you have other people doing it? And I'm like, this is my spiritual vitamin. And it's never a wasted time. I'm sure your audience studies a course. So as you know, like, when you invest time with spiritual studies and contemplation, you always leave expanded. So I can't even imagine what my life would be without that discipline, because of my own, I would never have done that. It took me 7 years to get through the first round on my own.
Oh, yeah.
That's how reluctant I was.
Wow.
So it was just like, I was going through a divorce. I was just like, and I'm sure a lot of people experience this, where they just take it goes on the back burner. But when I had to show up for other people, my ego got involved, and I was like, okay, I got to be on time and shit. So it's been such a gift to me. I thought I was doing something for Spirit, but it's been a real gift for me. And so I'm very proud to say that it will be part of my legacy.
Well, and I'm sure it's a gift to the people who have signed up, and those of us who study A Course in Miracles, again, there's one lesson for, a new lesson for 365 days in a row. If you want to do one a day, I actually just finished it for the 4th or 5th time a couple weeks ago. And there's always something new that I learn. And, as you, especially being the quote teacher there, we find that when we teach, we learn. What you give, is given back to you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, it's just very interesting. And nurturing other teachers. I mean, we're all teachers, but there are some people who really want to teach A Course in Miracles, who really want to hear their voice wrapped around the words. That's beautiful, and not everybody wants to do that. Some people really just want to study or be supported, but there are a good amount of people who want to do that. And so I find where my growth spurt, my growth curve is to lean back and let other people teach. I just get so passionate that I'm like, and it's like, just they'll find their way, let them all learn how to tie their own shoes. So at this point in that program, so having to just attempt to lean back a little bit and make more space for teachers to develop their own style. So it's always a classroom, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And, obviously with the programs you do, let's see, I believe you're in Chicago, so you support the arts community there. Isn't Voice Box a live on stage thing?
Voice Box is a once a month story event that I do with Kathy Richardson from Jefferson Starship. And I gather the storytellers, and then and I'll put the storytellers on stage, and in between each storyteller, she'll sing a song based on their story, which is such a beautiful thing, because you really have to develop your listening skills, especially if you're her, to really pay attention to what the story is saying. And usually it's in person at this iconic establishment called Fitzgerald's. And so since the shutdown, we've been doing it virtual. We've had communities virtual already. We also do a Sunday morning community called Speakeasy. So we had these other communities, but everything went virtual. And I guess that's why I'm working more than normal, was to help with the transition of it. But having had the Miracles Live 365 virtual for the last 7 years, it wasn't really that difficult.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you guys will get back on stage there. Wow, a lady from Starship. She must be a Pleiadian or something.
She took over for Grace Slick.
Did she? I didn't realize that. Yeah.
She's amazing. She has her own YouTube channel, Kathy Richardson. She's incredible. She makes my jaw drop every time I hear her sing. So.
Well, one other thing that piqued my interest is, I looked at some of your writings and that type of thing, and what I see, and you even state this, you're quite the advocate for of the divine feminine. Would you like to? Is that something you like to talk about? I'm interested in that.
Sure. The divine feminine in our society today, we don't have equality. And so, I believe it stems from the inequality of our divinity. Of course, God is non-gender.
Right. Yes.
But there are still two aspects of us that sit on either side of the seesaw. And we're all basically on the spectrum of it. I have a child who's transgender. So we've kind of gone through the conversation quite a bit with him, moving from feminine to masculine. And I said to him, if I had to identify, I identify as female, but if I had to identify on the spectrum, I would identify as uber female, because I really feel that about myself. I love everything about being feminine, and to not have a God that represents that in any of the books or theologies, it does a disservice to 50% of the population. Yeah. And so, and of course, if that's how it's perceived in our divinity, it's going to filter down into, payment and positioning in cultures. So that's, I think we have to heal it from the source of the problem, which is God is both feminine and masculine. And if we were to raise our children with the understanding of that, there would be a way different picture in regards to respecting women.
Mm-hmm. I love how you use it to empower women. Now, it's interesting.
I think it's actually to empower women and men.
Yeah, I can see that. Yep.
Absolutely. If you have an understanding of the feminine divine, you are going to treat the feminine way differently than if you don't.
Well, and I got my interest in that also perked up when I interviewed Gary Renard a couple months back, and he had mentioned that the novel by Dan Brown, The Da Vinci Code, was published on the exact same day in 2007 or 2003 as his book, Disappearance of the Universe. And so I grabbed a copy of Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown and I read it. And evidently, the divine feminine was actually the focus of most of native culture, I guess you would call it religious or spiritual activities. That would be in that through the centuries of the different religious dogmas, the divine feminine just kind of went, right down the drain on purpose, So it was really, I don't know if you've read that book, but, wow. And I'm
right.
not a reader, but.
Yes, I have read it. I think you're talking about Gary Renard.
Well,
Gary
yeah.
Renard wrote Disappearance of the Universe.
Yeah, and that's what I meant. But Gary told me about Dan Brown's book, Da Vinci.
Yes.
That's why I picked it up. Yeah.
Yeah, great book.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Great movie too. I know. I don't think I'll ever look at the Mona Lisa the same way again.
Hey, speaking of books, let's go there with you. You are quite the writer. I just a little while ago I was reading your stuff. I didn't get a chance to read them all, but wow, you are an amazing descriptive writer. Oh my gosh, you write like a poet, and you're writing nonfiction memoirs, and I go, wow, what great descriptions. You have a book called A Giant Love Song, a memoir, which is about your family and losing your mom, A Spiritual Vixen's Guide to an Unapologetic Life, with your uber female photo on the cover. So I like that. And is there one of those that you wouldn't mind talking about? Fine. Let's find out more about Spiritual Vixen. That's when you went through a tough time in your marriage, etc.
Yes. I kind of set out to write that book as a book that included the feminine divine, actually.
Yes.
And so, but I used the backdrop of this year of my life when I had gone through this breakup with my former husband. And I had to figure out what brought me to this moment. My husband left me for Miss Universe and I was devastated.
Miss freaking Universe.
Yeah.
I love it.
So I take the reader through this year of self-evaluation and threading through tools that helped me rediscover who I was and to acknowledge that I am not abandonable, basically. And so after each chapter, there is a tool that you can use and apply to your life that helps to kind of walk yourself out of hell or shoehorn yourself out of hell. And it was a really great experience to go through that classroom, but it's even more enjoyable to be far away from it and share with other people, because it was a really tough year. I was a single mom and I was acting and I was just basically devastated. But these classrooms come to us all, they come to us all, and they are opportunities to be tenderized so that we can evolve spiritually. And eventually that's what it's all for, a classroom for us to be helpful.
And when I read also too in your other memoir, A Giant Love Song, your dad was a giant. And that's about when you lost your mom too. Is that obviously another piece of your journey to coming to studying and teaching the A Course in Miracles?
Yeah, actually, it was directly related. When my mom passed away when I was younger, she battled breast cancer. And when she was battling breast cancer, she was such a pillar of the church at the time in our community, and she was so beloved in our community that everyone would come over and bring pamphlets and tinctures and ideas for her to heal. And so we had this, I remember finding on our table this brochure from Medjugorje, which is a place in Yugoslavia where these young children were seeing apparitions of the Blessed Mother. And they said that, that people were receiving healing. So I remember thinking, I want to go here and I want to get a healing for my mom. So my mom passed away, and I grew up, I moved into New York City, and I was about 21 or 22. And a friend of mine invited me to go to Medjugorje. And so I ended up on this trip, and on the trip, and we went up the hill to go to listen to the children who were giving, so they were channeling messages from the Blessed Mother. And I went up to the top of the hill, and they were saying, you know, the message of that evening was, the Blessed Mother is crying. She's weeping because you're being disposable with your children. This was like 25 years ago, maybe longer. And I didn't have any children at the time. And I thought, like, why is she weeping? And I raised my hand and I asked a question. And the question was, does she ever laugh? And if so, what makes her happy? And the woman standing next to me, or kneeling rather next to me, said, good question, honey. And it was the first time for me that I recognized that I had a spiritual authority, that I could ask questions, that I could question things. And because this was not available in my church of origin. So the next day we went up to the hill, and somebody asked, what books does the Blessed Mother recommend? And she said, the answer was, my son is channeling these books with these two therapists in New York City.
Wow.
And named a couple of the books. And it was before I had, I didn't have a beeper. I had nothing to write down. I just had my little noodle to count on. And I didn't remember all of the titles that they said, but I did remember the book title, The Song of Prayer. And so I thought, Song of Prayer. I just have to remember the Song of Prayer. When I get back to New York City, I'll look up these two therapists and I'll find the Song of Prayer. But when I went back to New York City, I got pregnant, and then I got married to my former husband, then I got divorced. So my life took a few left turns. And it wasn't until I went through this major classroom of unforgiveness with my former husband that I started asking for guidance. I had been going through the 12-step program, and it got me so far, but I still had unforgiveness towards him. So I was asking for guidance, for healing, for some sort of way out of unforgiveness and the toxicity that it brings. And that's when I found A Course in Miracles. And it found it in this old bookshop in Wisconsin when I was on a trip, and I picked it up, and I didn't know what it was, but I knew that I was supposed to take it home with me.
Yeah.
And there was two of them, and I purchased both of them because they looked different. One was like, this is the one that I purchased. This is the original, so it's all right now. And then the other one was just the text, and it's in bold print. It's just beautiful, and I still have that one too. And so I took it home with me, and I started sharing it with my friends. I wasn't necessarily teaching it, but I was sharing the concepts because I was so excited about them. And one of them said to me, can you start a group and start teaching this? I had already been running, 12-step groups in my house and writing groups in my house. So throwing another group on top of that wouldn't have been a problem for me. So I said, sure. And they invited some friends invited friends. And one of the first people that came to my door that I didn't know said, if you're going to teach A Course in Miracles, you need to read this book. And she handed me a copy of the Song of Prayer.
Wow. After the Blessed Mother had told you about it.
Yeah. And I remember I was in my house and I'm like, oh my gosh, the Song of Prayer. And nobody knew why I was so excited. They're like, what is she freaking out about? It's just like a thin little pamphlet. Yeah. And I'm like, the Blessed Mother, blah, blah, blah. I was like basically talking in tongues because, when things like that happen, it's like, wow, this is so cool that I didn't have to go find it, that it came right to me.
Yeah.
For me, when I teach about the feminine divine, that's what I teach. I teach about allowing things to come to you as opposed to the warrior that goes out and gets. So I feel like at this moment in time, we're actually would be very benefited by leaning into the feminine divine and learning how to use those kinds of energies so that we could navigate this new paradigm that we're moving into.
Yeah, I could see that. We could definitely use some of that because, and I'm glad you brought that up. Let's move into that. Obviously, we're all there's almost 8 billion people on the planet, and we're all living within this, what I call a fear demic, but I like yours better, the love demic. I like that about outside, you talked about the divine feminine, incorporating that. Are there any other strategies or ideas or something from the course that you might recommend people to incorporate in their lives in order to navigate through this?
Yeah. It's a time for transparency. So anything that you think you're hiding, anything that you think you're ashamed of, anything you think you're shortcutting or you're shoving under the rug, anything that you're apologetic about, anything that you are judging, anything that you've left in the carpet or in the back of the closet, now's the time to make peace with that. If you don't heal it, it will suck you in and eat you whole. And so that's where we're at right now.
So knowing that you need to make peace with it, obviously that ties into forgiveness. I mean, not only of other people, but yourself, right?
Yeah. I would start with yourself.
Yeah.
I would start with yourself. I would look at all those lumps and bumps under the carpet. I'd pull them out. I'd call them by name. And I'd say, this is the moment that I'm going to shroud you in love. And I'm not going to be ashamed of you. And I'm going to speak to you and of you. And I'm no longer going to amputate myself from this. And if you have unforgiveness towards another, it's only because you're projecting that thing that you don't want to heal about yourself onto your brother. And so, it works both ways. You can heal it within yourself, or you can use your brother to project it on him and recognize he has nothing to do with your own projections. And that what you see is your internal landscape that you don't want to heal. And then it will draw you back to go within again. I mean, it's always an inside job.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. It is interesting. I have found, and thank goodness for my studying of the principles of the Course in Miracles, you go out, and the public go to the grocery store, and everybody's got a 6-foot wedge of separation forced between them because of the ego's insidious ruse of separation right now going on. And you walk by somebody and you can feel their fear of you or me. It's interesting. Walk by somebody and just feel they are afraid of you because they think you're going to cause them to die. And so I've been practicing the unconditional love and the forgiveness, just walking along. And I find that when I'm going by and I sense that, I'll feel a little bit of judgment well up, and I'm just not interested in the judgment anymore. I just say, Holy Spirit, take it from me. It's not my job.
Yeah. And, Carl, the thing is, the best kept secret is that we are going to die. that is a guarantee.
Yeah, that's true.
So instead of fearing it, it might be better. And look, it's another place in our lives that we literally take this thing called death and shroud that with fear and judgments and, all kinds of stories. And so that it would be really great if we stopped fearing it, that's just a part of the package. It's just a part of the package, and it will happen. And as far as I can see, everybody who's ever died and came back has gone ahead and written a bestseller book about how awesome it is. So it can't be the worst thing.
Yeah.
Somebody come back and be like, man, you don't want that to happen. They're all usually high on how awesome it was. So
yeah,
I don't know why the ego has used this, this idea of death. And of course, miracles, we talk about eternal life, and many philosophies and theology, we talk about eternal life. And yet we get so stuck on this parenthesis of this small time and this little meat suit, as my friend Joe Wolf would say. No. So I think that instead of fighting death, we might learn and teach how to prepare for death as a beautiful exit, like you would prepare to enter a stage and exit a stage. Like you get to look at that. I get to look at that. I get to decide what is going to be my legacy before I leave, and how do I want to gracefully exit. And we don't have classes in that or conversations about that.
I think you can look as examples of what you just talked about. Bill Thetford and Ken Wapnick, both principals of the beginning of A Course in Miracles, they lived and walked in complete resonance and harmonies with all the principles of the ACIM. And when they got to their end of their life, they just kind of just gave up their body. And also another great example of that, one of my favorite teachers is Dr. Wayne Dyer. You know, it's hard to believe he passed away 5 years ago, but you know, he really got to a place of being in total spiritual harmony, and he went to sleep and nobody even expected it. And that was it, you know. Wayne expected it.
Yeah. Right. Well, I think we should all expect it. It's going to happen. You know, it is, you know, it's the, you know, and I don't think of it as death. I think of it as, you know, evolution. Mm-hmm. Well, if we are light beings, why would we hang on to this body that causes us to have such a limited experience of light?
Well, and, you know, of course, society in general doesn't adhere to this. You know, to them, everything is separate, and they don't understand, you know, I mean, this hand I see right here, this is solid, this is reality here. But according to the teachings of A Course in Miracles, this life is an illusion. And so why not gently lay it aside? But because the majority of the people in the world, you know, negativity is reality. And there's nothing worse than death. I just try to live my life as best as I can and enjoy it as much as I can while I'm here. But I like your words about that. It's very comforting.
Well, you know, I think I came by it the hard way in that, like, I did get to front row seats to watch my mom die as a kid. Mm-hmm. And then my family has gone through lots of deaths. So my family is a big Irish Catholic family and great senses of humor and great storytellers. And they like to say, we put the fun in funeral. So it's never been, and my father always told me stories as a kid of how he was, you know, still in contact with his mom who died. So it's never been like an end, you know, it's always been, you know, kind of a transition where you still have connection with those ancestors. For me, I don't think, you know, I mean, it would be scary if we believe that death is the death, but it's not. And I know personally that the veil is very thin, you know, that because of the way my father raised me, and also because of personal experiences I had, that I've witnessed, like, the veil is very thin, and there's nothing to be afraid of.
That really is comforting. You know, I've got to ask you about your dad. I feel like I would have liked to meet him. Well, how big was he? How tall was he? And
well, you know,
you call him the giant.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't necessarily that he was so tall, because he was like 6'4". Although my husband always tells me that I exaggerate, but my father shrank towards the end of his life, as we do. But also that we were so little.
Yeah.
You know? Like, as little kids, you're like, that is a huge man. And he worked 2 jobs. So, and I was raised by my mom, who was like 5 feet tall, maybe shorter. And then
I saw the pictures. Yeah.
Yeah. And then my 5 older sisters. So, everyone was small and feminine. And then this big, bristly man would come in who smelled of like onions and wine and work clothes. And, you know, and so it was like, the giant, you know. So, so that's an interesting concept, that we sort of fear what is unfamiliar. But yeah, he was a great guy. He was a great storyteller. And it's the story in that book that saved my life, really. When I was going through that time of watching my mom pass away, I was so in resistance to the idea of being able to live without her. I thought, like, if she dies, I'll go with her, because I can't imagine living without my mom would be like living without breath. But when my father called me over to her deathbed at the end of the story, he tells me the story about his mom, and he tells me the story that his mom passed away when he was my age.
Oh, wow.
And then she told him that she would always be with him, and that some kids, that he was lucky because some kids would grow up and have to leave their moms and go off to college and go off to work, but that he would always have connection with his mom wherever she was. And he began telling me these stories about what that looked like. And I remember sitting there as a child thinking, my dad was once a boy. Like I was like, where is that boy? Like that didn't make sense. But what did make sense to me was that I trusted my father. Mm-hmm. And that although my aunts had sent me, to the teachers to try and, knock into my head that my mom was dying, and they sent people to try and get me to accept this, it wasn't until my father told me this story that really helped me, because I saw that somebody else had walked through my particular place in hell that I was experiencing and had come out the other side. And that's why I love storytelling, because a well-placed story can save your life. And knowing that he was a little boy like me, whose mom died, and he grew up and he had a life, like I didn't see that as a possibility for me.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and again, I'm going to recommend to anybody watching or listening to this to pick up some of Maureen's books, because I'm telling you, I'm just impressed with your writing style. It's just so expressive. Gosh, I write nonfiction, and I'm not even close to that. So I better brush up a little bit.
Well, I run writers groups. So, a couple times a week, I'm working with writers to help them.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you have the writers retreat and classes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm passionate about writers and writing and storytelling, and I spend a lot of time, doing that, and studying A Course in Miracles, which is so well written. Just studying books that are well written it kind of helps to fill the well. Yeah. And so, yeah.
You're very poetic in style like that. This is a question that I ask every one of my guests, all 26 episodes, and it reflects from the name of the show, World Awakenings. Why do you think, what is your opinion on why now, more than ever, the population of the world is awakening to all things enlightening? Even during this crazy time, it's still happening.
Why now?
Why now? More than ever in any time in human history.
I
got you.
Yeah, I love to be transparent and honest, and I have no idea why now. I could speculate.
Sure, we'll go ahead and speculate. I like it.
All right, fine. I would say that a lot of things had to be in place and healed before we got to this moment. I would say that the children that are coming in are so much more evolved than the generation that's going out in regards to unconditional love. When I have 4 children, when I pick them up from school or their groups, they hug each other and they speak to each other in such a beautiful and compassionate and transparent way. They have such compassion for, I remember as children, we had words like faggot and the N-word and these, ways that we condemned each other who were different. This new generation has such deep compassion for anyone who seems to be on the fringes of society. And I think we're evolving because of them, because they're demanding, like you see the children who are fighting against gun violence, and the children that are coming in are just spectacular. And I think their energy is helping to raise the vibration of the entire planet.
I saw some interesting research from the Pew Research Center, and they did a release on the category of people in the world known as SBNR, spiritual but not religious. And it especially applies to the millennials, and I forget the title assigned to even the younger generation. But that more and more people are leaving organized religion, and because they don't like the specific controlling dogmas of so many of the religions, and they're just simply, they believe in something greater, all that is, the source, the creator, God, whatever term you want to use for it. And they no longer want to be involved in organized religion, but they are spiritual.
Yes. I mean, they're too smart for all that. I mean, religion was created to control people.
Oh yeah, just read Da Vinci Code and you'll find out about that. It's even though it's a novel, it's got quite the history of religion.
Right. And at the very same time, many people have received many gifts. But it's not the optimal way to go to God. The optimal way to go to God is to have a direct communication with God. So any book or philosophy or theology that tells you need an interpretation or a middleman, which all religions mostly do, is going to prevent the optimal idea of what religion is supposed to be, to bring you to God.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to make you jump through a whole bunch of hoops and make it hard for you to have a personal relationship with your God. So, religion will, in most cases, only get you so far. And then, in order to have awakening, you got to go to God.
Well, it's from a personal aspect. I'm way older than the millennials, and I grew up. Interesting, I grew up in a time. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. My dad fought in World War II. My mom was stayed-at-home homemaker, and my dad was a blue-collar worker for 40 years, and very unusual. And I didn't realize, I didn't know anything else, but my parents never talked about religion, never talked about God, never went to church. My mom was spiritual, but the topic was never even brought up. And I realized looking back that it actually was good. It gave me a blank slate when it came to spirituality. So when I found, I started off with what I call positive possibility power thinking, reading all the books of Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, Dr. Robert Schuller, Wayne Dyer, Deepak Chopra, Tony Robbins, on and on. When I finally found A Course in Miracles, it was just like, I just sucked it all in. I had no blockages from any religious dogma. And I didn't really realize how grateful I am for having that blank slate.
That's beautiful.
Yeah,
that's really beautiful.
Yeah, and so it's something nice for me to look back on my parents, and I do appreciate that. I am going to ask too again. Go back to your books. Actually, now I see you've written. Is this a children's book, The Life of a Sandcastle?
Yes.
Well, tell us about that.
It's actually a children's book about death.
Oh yeah, so great. We were talking about that.
Yeah, so it was inspired by my experience as a child, and then getting to see some children who were going through the experience of death, and getting to the frustration of knowing that this is such a huge concept, and for a child, death it's a very hard concept. And it feels like trying to wrap an elephant in a gum wrapper, it's too immense. I remember when my mom died, and the idea of forever, like she's never coming back, that was just like, it didn't make any sense to me. So when I got older, and after having a few experiences with watching other children suffer, I decided to write this book. And I can say for sure, it just sort of channeled through me. It's called The Life of a Sandcastle. And it's about this clump of sand that gets washed up on the beach.
Mm-hmm.
And it meets up with a school of children, and they mold it and they decorate it, and they make it into this magnificent sandcastle. And then they run off to get lunch, and it sees its reflection in the water in the pail, and it falls in love with itself. And almost right when it falls in love with itself, like a gust of wind comes, and it starts to fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
And the ocean begins to call it back, and it gets afraid of where it came from.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and the story rhymes. So it's this allegory of death and life, and how there's nothing to fear.
Wow, that is beautiful. That is beautiful. The life of a sandcastle. I love that story. Yeah. You know,
I'll give you a little bit of it if I can remember it.
Oh, sure.
Okay. I'll begin with my life, a fine place to begin. When I first landed here with a bump and a spin, I came on a huge wave as it crashed to the shore. I arrived here on earth from the great ocean floor. Just a clump of wet sand, nothing more, nothing less. I felt scared and alone as the ocean recessed.
That is awesome.
And it's about,
Yeah.
at the end it says, a sandcastle is nice, but there's no place like home. So that's the end of it. When it gets back into the ocean and it realizes that it's in this state of fluidity, and so that's the book.
You're never too old. I'm gonna have to get a copy of that. So.
Oh yeah, and it was illustrated by one of my students when I worked at a church in Chicago. I was running youth and family, and I was teaching the kids spiritual practices, which was such a sweet chapter of my life. And I remember they'd show up on the first day of the year, and I'd say, "What do you want to do with your life?" And this one child said to me, "I want to make art for God." And I was like, "Who are you?" And so I said, "You know what? You're going to illustrate my book."
Yeah.
So it's all done by this child.
Oh, nice. I've never asked anybody this on the podcast, but I'm curious, simply because we've been talking about death. I have a number of friends who have lost family members to suicide.
Mm-hmm.
How would you counsel, with what you do as a spiritual counselor and coach, somebody? I don't mean to put you on the spot. I'm just curious, because I would like them to know how to deal with it.
Yeah. God, what a classroom. What can be a very scarring classroom.
Oh yeah.
Like, especially for those people left behind, it feels like just a bucket of barbed wire guilt. It just feels like really a harsh one. What I intuitively know is that those people who, if you're in pain and you have the option of taking an aspirin. For me, many years in my life, I didn't take aspirin. I didn't take anything. I just don't know why. I just didn't. And one day somebody said, you can take an aspirin. And I was like, yeah, does it really work? I don't know. So I took the aspirin and my headache went away. And I was like, what the heck? This is amazing. So what I know about people who decide to end their lives is that they are in so much pain. And that's the aspirin, and it works. And that is the best choice that they can make in that moment. And it's hard to say, like, if you love them, you would want them to be out of pain. And that's how they chose to do it. Whether or not it's the most evolved choice is not up for debate, because we don't judge somebody for where they're at. This is just where they're at right now. And, life is eternal. So they're still with us. And like I said, the veil is thin. And for those left behind, like, you can still, I believe, have a conscious connection with them. So that's what I would say about that. To have great compassion for others who have made that choice.
Well, and it's interesting though, seeing it's certainly not an aspirin for the people left behind after they take their own life. What you said, really, what I've seen, those people, the family and friends left behind, it really is barbed wire and lots of guilt. And it's hard for those people to grasp what happened.
Well, but it comes down to the fundamental belief that we think death is bad,
Mm-hmm.
and that we think death is something to fear, and we think that death is eternal. So it's not. And
So glad you said that. Thank you.
yeah, I mean, it's still. I mean, it's a tough classroom. That's for sure.
Yeah.
It's a really tough classroom, and extra grace required for everyone involved. But the other thing is that the more we speak of it, the more we look at it, the more swiftly it will heal itself.
Yeah.
So to stigmatize it and to put shame on top of it is just going to continue to perpetuate this dark corner. And so we have to stop stigmatizing it. And that's why I want to equate it with an aspirin. I mean, that's it. I mean, it's.
Well, thank you for talking about that. It's funny because I was just kind of moved to ask you that. Having known a lot of friends that have gone through it recently, and what you say is very comforting, very, very deep understanding. So, well, Maureen, we've been chatting for a long time. I have to ask, I told people in the intro, many people know you from seeing you on TV and in a movie screen. Are you still doing much acting right now?
Well, I'm not really doing it in the traditional way of auditioning in TV and film, but I now do what I call activist theater. And so, like, I have shows that I do, and voice box is a part of the show. But like, I do a one-person show called Transparent Love, which is about raising a child who's transgender. And so for me, it's an opportunity to use the tools that I was given as an actress and create an opportunity for conversations around things, again, that are stigmatized. So I love doing that. And I think for me, that's church, is when you use a story to help lift the vibration and transform some thinking around a specific, idea. And so I'll go around. I had a whole tour that I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
Doing a show in New York and in Los Angeles. I was supposed to be in Los Angeles this weekend. Everything got canceled. So.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah, right. But the most important part of it is not the performance for me. The most important part is the conversation that happens after the performance. So I do the performance so that I can cause a conversation and provide a space for others to speak the unspeakable and to speak about what they fear. So that's what I'm doing with my theater, acting background right now.
Well, I have to say that, I've talked to a number of people, and you so beautifully are willing to address some things that a lot of people won't talk about. And you do so in a beautiful, comforting way, and I like that. So I signed up for your daily video. I've been getting that. And this morning I found out about your favorite F words.
Yeah, you can sign up at ACI. What is ACIM? So if you're listening in, go ahead and get yourself a free week of meditations and inspirations from A Course in Miracles. What is ACIM?
Yeah.
It's really fun to create that. And, when I was creating that, I went to my internal teacher and I was like, how can I help make A Course in Miracles not seem so odd? And it was like, use the Beatles. Everyone understands.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
The Beatles. Okay. And so it was really fun creating that.
Yeah, you shared the lyrics from Paul McCartney's Blackbird, and I hadn't listened to that for a long time. And boy, those are some beautiful words. I really like it.
Yeah. Yeah. Getting to do that and finding out the creative inspiration behind some of these songs has been I think it's lovely to do that.
Well, thank you for doing that. And once again, we've been talking to Maureen Muldoon. She has Maureen Muldoon. She has a website of the same name, and you can find out all kinds of things there. She's got books out: Giant Love Song, a memoir, Spiritual Vixen's Guide to an Unapologetic Life, The Life of a Sandcastle, Out of the Box, Volume 1, all kinds of beautiful courses on her website, coaching, and an actress. I love it. You are a talented, lovely lady. Thank you so much for coming on World Awakenings, Maureen.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me, Carl. Best of luck. God bless.
Oh, bless you too. Thank you.
This has been another episode of World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with your host, Carl Gruber, a certified law of attraction life coach. We welcome you to tune in each and every episode of this podcast, World Awakenings, as we open your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that all the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to the truth of all things metaphysical and spiritual, and just how they play an all-important role in our moment-to-moment everyday life. Much love and light to you, my friend. Thank you for tuning in.